Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back. We are back after our 2-week vacation. Really wasn't calling it a hiatus or anything like that, but we are back on this week's episode of Communications Cigars, where we're kind of talking a little bit about some calculations. We're coming to look at some of that, kind of that auxiliary power. And we're also going to talk about some books, because education is key. Education is important on there. And that's one of the cool things about Communication Cigars. That's why we kind of started about it, enjoying having a cigar while we're talking about communications. So I'm your host, John Crook. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this evening. I want to thank everybody for bearing with it. Of course, as some people say, where you been the last couple weeks and stuff? Well, guess what? 2 weeks ago, we were actually coming back from Hamvention 2022. I don't even know what year it is sometimes. Hamvention 2022. And then, of course, last week, Monday was Memorial Day. So we took that week, we took that day off, just kind of needed a little bit of a day to recoup and do some things and stuff on there. Actually, I was doing EMS that weekend because everybody knows, besides radios and this kind of passion, EMS is my next passion. But we are back here. Thanks for everyone tuning in. As I kind of gave a little update last week, kind of a short little YouTube short thing that they're kind of doing now, sort of like I don't know, it kind of seems like the TikTok version of YouTube, but whatever. We got some good things coming. A lot of good things are actually coming down the pipe here. We got some good shows that are coming up. We got a lot of good content coming up. We're going to be actually coming up on the first year anniversary in about 3 months of Communications and Cigars. So we started it back in September of 2021. And now here we are almost a full year later. We're doing it, and it's been great. It's been a great time for everybody and everything like that. Excuse me. Now, of course, our show airs on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Some people have asked, hey, have we thought about changing it or anything? No, we're not going to go ahead and change it. That's not one of the things that we're looking at, upcoming changes. I know some people said, man, it would be great if it was a different night of the week, or maybe if it was even on the weekends. But I think the show kind of just heads off on Monday nights. But one of the things, we got some content coming up here, which I'm going to be really excited. We're going to do an episode coming up here pretty quick. We're dedicated in talking about marine radios. And I'm going to have someone who's been on a guest on the show in the past. He used marine radios, and he's going to kind of bring it how it was in the past to kind of how it is currently now on there. So we're going to have a good discussion coming up about marine radios. We're going to be looking at doing some stuff talking about CBs. We got some cool antenna ideas, or some different designs for antennas. More so of how do you want to say, a commercial business setup where, hey, here's what it is. I need to put up an antenna, those kind of things. Well, you can look at what you want to think about it. We're going to be then coming up here with a couple ones in the near future here. We're actually going to be doing a live from the tech bench. But it's not really going to be the tech bench. It's going to be the install outside. So we're going to give you some, show you some pictures and stuff on how you can go and do an install. That's right, an install. So people have asked me, hey, how do you do your installs? What do you use? Those kind of things. And I'll tell you, that's a really, really good topic and question, because when you're trying to install in the vehicles and stuff like that, that's what gets a big concern, a very, very big concern, because I don't know about you. I don't want to drill holes into my vehicles. I don't want to do any of that stuff. So this is going to be kind of an interesting one coming up. And then this is a really exciting one. I'm working on this one really hard. We're looking at doing a weather station one, a weather course. Now, and I won't go too much into it because I don't want to give away the episode too much. But a lot of people do like, oh, I got the alerts to my phone. I got the alerts on the TV or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But I'll tell you what, and it doesn't matter if you're ham, doesn't matter if you're whatever, there's going to be times you want weather alerts. And even if you're not into communications, but you tune in here, I have people tune into the channel and says, I'm not really that big in there, but hey, I want to learn a couple things. And that's why they go ahead and come to the show here. So lots of great stuff. One other thing we're looking at starting a podcast. Yes, that's correct. A lot of people said, John, it's great. I'll turn on your show. I'll listen to it, but I kind of started, you can almost argue that I started the podcast idea before the show idea, way before the show, almost like a year or two. But I had a good friend email me. He says, "Hey John, what was with that podcast idea? Is that moving forward and stuff like that on there?" And I said, I got to thinking, I'm like, man, maybe podcast would be right. And that's going to be the MCOM Chat Podcast. That's right. It's going to be called the MCOM Chat Podcast. We're going to have more details as we get closer to the launch of our first episode. But it's going to be a podcast where we're going to discuss stuff related to emergency communications and not just amateur stuff. Once again, Communications Cigars. We're not specific to brand or model. We're not specific to one type of radio service. We like to talk about it all on there. And that's kind of what the MCOM Chat Podcast is about. It's not amateur. It's not, public safety only. It's going to be focusing on the aspect of emergency communications and bringing forth news tidbits, maybe from the industry, that are more than amateur related, amateur based on there. So, but hey, people always say, "Hey John, how can I get a hold of you? What can I do if someone wants to contact me and stuff like that?" I will go ahead and say, this is the email. Go ahead and email me, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. JJK Communications is a sponsor of Communications and Cigars. They have gone ahead and been gracious enough to help us provide the equipment and give us some of the radios that we talk about and use and everything on there. So a big thank you to, yes, JJK Communications on there. We have had some people saying, "Hey, can I sponsor it? What can I do, if I wanted to help the show and stuff like that?" And you know what, if you are interested and want to help out the show in some way, we're not asking for donations. We're not asking for solicitations. We're not asking anything like this whatsoever. But if you do want to help, you do want to have, I guess, your little slice of pie to say, "Hey, how can you help out down here?" Feel free to email us. Or you got a show topic. You got something right here. Communications-cigars. Not and, but -cigars.com. Or excuse me, I can't even talk today. Communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Sorry, I got multiple things happening on my screen here right now. So on there. Now, here's the big one. Here's the big one that I've had people ask. They said, "John, where can I get this? Hey, I saw this." Some people said, "Hey, I saw it. Are you selling it? What's going on?" So we are looking at doing some merch. I never thought we would get to the point where we would be doing merch, but the company Fourth and Birch, they did some really great logos for it. They did some nice screen press. They really, I got to give a big hand to Fourth and Birch, and they are looking at some of that. In addition, there is the new PPOTA, so porta potties on the air. We are looking at all those kind of things coming up there. So who knows? We might be working and stuff on there, so we'll let people know if the Communications and Cigar shirts will be available, as well as the porta potties on the air. Yes, so if you aren't aware of it, come on over to it's my Facebook page, John Crook, JOHN space KRUK, and we were at Hamvention, took a little picture of a tower which happened to be behind the porta potties, and it looked like it was porta potties at the base of this tower. So kind of the joke, kind of porta potties on the air. Driving back, I took some pictures of porta potties with the family, and it just kind of turned into this funny thing. So we're looking at it. So stay tuned for all that. So lots of big stuff coming up here on the channel. But what are we talking? Hey, let's forget this part. We talked about communications. Let's quickly talk about cigars. I want to, first of all, go ahead and say thank you to a very, very close and dear friend. I'm going to call him TJ. Because I don't know. Well, let me back up. I have to say, first of all, thank you to people that watch this channel, that know I do have some people called me an aficionado of cigars, but do have a fondness for cigars. But they went, and I've been at shows, and people have actually come up to me, and they've been like, "Hey, here you go. Here's a cigar. By all means, here's a cigar. Thank you for doing the show," that kind of thing like that. I've even been invited to a couple cigar swaps that might come up. So, actually stay tuned. If I'm going to Huntsville, maybe we might have to have a Communications and Cigars meetup on there at Huntsville. That's a couple months yet, but still too close, or not too close. But anyways, my dear friend TJ, I won't say his name because I don't want to. Maybe he did this as a nice gift for me. I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want to get him in any trouble. But was nice enough to give me this box of A Fuente cigars. As you can see, it's still in the package. This is official. I'm so thankful for you, TJ, if you're watching. This is an amazing gift. And that's kind of what today's cigar topic is going to go ahead and be. Just hey, when you're looking for cigars and stuff like that, understand, there's been a lot of talk. People are like, the best kind of cigars are Cuban cigars, and other people are saying, no, the best kind of cigars are Dominican Republic cigars, and all this kind of stuff across there. Everybody's going to have their own type and taste for the most part of cigars that they want. I like the A Fuentes. The edition here. It is basically the 8-5-8 anniversary. There is 10 cigars in here. I almost don't want to open them up and smoke them. That's how much this means to me on there. So just even smelling them. I wish YouTube had smell-o-vision or something, because it's just, even the box, just the box that it's in, it's just amazing on there. I just want to say thank you so much to TJ. TJ, thank you so much if you're watching. Thank you, my dear friend. And I hope to see you actually in a couple months on there. So, all right, let's jump into the core of the show. So once again, we're talking about powering things a little bit. We're going to talk about some math calculations. Towards the end here, I got some books too I want to go ahead and I'm going to talk about here coming up here. Really great books. I picked them up here. We're going to go ahead and talk about that towards the end of the show there. But the reason I'm bringing up the books is because you'll see how the reference for these things come into play with the books on there. All right. So the biggest thing that I think a lot of people need to do and think about is your radio usage. All righty. And what I mean by that is, it's not how you use it, not antennas, what type of radio you have, what frequency bands or anything. But the core thing we take for granted, I feel, in the communications world, which is our power sources. Okay. Handheld radios are great. Handheld radios have batteries, right? You put the battery on there. If you need to charge battery, you charge the battery, it's good. You get an extra battery, you put that extra battery on there, you're good to go, not a problem, right? But what happens when we run into a situation where we're dealing with mobile, or we're dealing with bases, or we're dealing with repeaters? All right? Great. They need constant, 12 volt DC or 120 volt AC sources. So that means, hands down, that if you don't have that source, that power, you're going to have problems. Hands down, you're going to have problems. Once again, handheld's not a problem, because people think, oh, well, we got mobile chargers, we got chargers for bases or houses or whatever. Or some radios even have battery eliminator. You slap it on here and cord, and you plug that cigarette lighter in. That's great, but that's using the battery power of your car. What happens if the battery power of your car goes? Okay, what happens if the AC power to your site goes? You got a generator? Great. What if the generator doesn't fire up? You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things on there. Now, I'm of the mindset, the talk and stuff like that, too many links in the chain is not good. Okay, that's a good theory. A lot of people do subscribe to it, like I do myself. But if you're not going to have many links in the chain, when one link breaks, it could be very substantial. So that's why I wanted to take an episode to talk and kind of start about getting down the road, making everybody think about power sources. And once again, handhelds, great, fine, not a problem. I can't even find my handhelds here, but okay. So here, we'll go back to the public safety handheld. But the battery slaps on here. Once again, it's nice. Hey, my battery's going dead. I take that off, put on a new battery, and I'm good to go. I'm running down there. Yeah, guess what? Problem, because if that battery, if I don't have anything to charge that battery, I am in essence screwed. Alrighty. Like I said, mobiles are different. Now, there's a lot of different types of batteries out there, and I'm not going to get into the battery thing. I will talk about the battery that I'm using, but the reason I say don't enter is because we start out with NiCads, then we went to nickel metal hydrides or NiMis, okay? Then we went from NiMis to lithium ions or LIs, okay? Now we're into this whole scheme of things now, where now we're at lithium iron polymer now, okay? Lithium iron batteries, LIFEs or LiFis, okay? Or LiFes as some people call it. But now we're dealing with LiFi Pros, okay? So the type of battery chemistry you use, totally up to you, because batteries are gonna be big. Some people will use marine cell batteries, which have sort of like a lead-based core. There's new ones out there. I mean, they're all over the place. What I'm talking about is the numbers in this case. Alrighty. And that is where we're going to come and play. What numbers specifically? Well, obviously we need to look at voltage, because we have to have voltage match, right? Duh. You can't take something 12 volts and feed it with 6 volts. You got to do some things on there, right? Okay. But what we're doing here now is today we're talking about calculations and how long something is going to run. Because it's not a physical size anymore. You know, people used to think bigger the battery, the longer the runtime stuff. That may have happened before. Not now. Now, we need to look at something called amp hours. And amp hours is where that creme de la creme, that sweet spot, is going to go ahead and be at. But before we drop into these calculations, I want to give you an example here, okay? This battery, the labeling is weird because it's green, like the green screen. So didn't really, I guess, quite think that way through, but it's still, you can kind of see it on there. So this is, I actually bought it. It's a Tracker Lithium. Now I'm not speaking for the company or anything like this. The company did not send it to me. I want to disclose that. I was in Cabela's walking around, because what right-minded person does not just walk around Cabela's? And I saw this in there. This is a 12 volt, 18 amp hours. So you can kind of see right up there. Oh, 18 amp hours. Okay. 12 volt, 18 amp hours. And this is a lithium iron. I don't know if you can see it too well. Lithium iron phosphate battery. They call it LiFi Pro. Li for lithium, Fe for iron, Po4 for polymer. So lithium iron polymer battery. This thing is super light. I mean, super light. And that's where I'm like, I'm not going to get into this whole battery type of stuff, because you can get some sealed lead acid batteries and stuff like that. 18 amp hours, and these things are going to be huge. Like, it's going to be huge. This is 18 amp hour one that I picked up, and it was a great price. Okay. I'm not going to go into price because I bought mine at Cabela's. You can buy this type at numerous other places, but I was just walking by and I saw it. I wanted to go ahead and do it, and that's what I did. So just keep in mind that's there. Once again, don't work for the company. The battery was not sent to me for anything like that on there for testing. I purchased it myself, and I'm going to be using it for a couple things. But as we're talking about power, so a couple things we want to talk about power just kind of quickly on here. Once again, this is normally a green, but it's black because of the screen. But these are slide-on connectors. I did go with the Anderson power pole on here because I'm going to be running with radios. So I kind of standardized on some of that stuff on there. But the biggest thing that I needed to know is that I needed to know how big or how long is this battery going to run? Because they had lesser ones too. They had I think a 12 amp hour battery and a 6 amp hour battery, maybe. I think it was there. But they had other options on there. Obviously the 6 and the 12 are going to be smaller than the 18, and they're going to cost less than the 18. But what do I do? Right? Is a 6 going to be enough? Is a 12 going to be enough? Is the 18 enough? And then, going one step further, let me take a look at this and think of it this way. I wonder, am I going to need to hook these things up to increase the amp hours? So instead of going ahead and buying a bunch of batteries and spending all this money and stuff like that, you know what? Time to come up to the old cranium. And when I came up to the old cranium, I said, let's do some math. Let's do some calculations. And you know what I found out? I found out that not a lot of research and information. Research. Let me cancel that. There's research done, but not a lot of readily available information. And that's why I wanted to talk to you tonight about some of these calculations. So let's go ahead and take a look at here. We're first going to start out tonight talking about the calculating amp hours of battery usage. This is going to be your first and foremost key thing that you need to do, because if you can't do that, then you're going to be spending money. You're going to be wasting money. You're either going to buy too much battery, or you're going to be buying too little of a battery. on there. So let's go up here. So the first thing we need to do, so we're going to calculate amp hours of battery usage. And what I mean by calculating amp hours of battery usage is just that. How many amps per hour, or I should say more importantly, how many amps can I put into this battery or drain off this battery, which will translate to how many hours I can use this battery. So it's really simple and easy to actually do the calculation. So what we're going to do here is first we're going to start out the number of amps. Okay, so the number of amps of the device you're using times, and I put that times in there so it wasn't confusing in the parentheses brackets there, times the number of hours of discharge. Alrighty? And that's going to tell you, just a simple multiplication formula is going to tell you what type of battery you need. So, for an example, let's look at the next line here. If I have a device that runs 10 amp hours of current, 10 amp hours of current. Now, we're dealing with current. We're not dealing with voltage. We're not dealing with resistance factors or anything. Because what you're going to do is you need the battery voltage to match the voltage of the radio or the device you're using. So if you have a 12-volt radio, the battery's got to be 12 volts. It's a 1-to-1 thing. There's no calculations in there. 12-volt radio, 12-volt battery, okay? But radios do different amps of current or draw based on what the power output of the radio or what the radio can do as for functionality out there, okay? So 10 amp hours of current. And let's say I wanted to take this radio that needs 10 amp hours of current for transmit, and I wanted to run it by 10 hours. So as you see, 10 amps and 10, hours. That would say I would need a 100 amp hour battery. 100 amp hours. Now, is this going to give me... This battery here, is this going to give me 100 amp hours of battery? No, it's not. It's an 18 amp hour of battery. That's fine. 18 amp hours is going to be fine, but I wouldn't be able to use that in this case and scenario because I want to do 10 amps of current for 10 hours. But let's break down this math a little more, shall we? All right. So I went in and I looked at some general specs, okay? General specs on what I was doing. And I looked at the radio. Now, most radios will go ahead, the manufacturers in the manual will go ahead and give you what the draw is on a radio. Now, they usually will give you high end. And that's what we have here. So in this radio, general radio I picked out, just the radio sitting there for general receive purposes, like listening to the weather, listening to a repeater, listening, whatever, sitting there doing nothing, microphone's not keyed, nothing else, and it's going to draw a half of an amp, so 0.5 amps, so a half of an amp for receive. Alrighty. Now, the radio spec'd out as it draws approximately 11 amps at 50 watts. So the whole time that I'm transmitting at 50 watts, it's going to draw 11 amps off that battery. Now, that's where they ended. Because they give you the high amount, right? They're going ahead and saying, okay, half an amp for receive, 11 amps at 50 watts. You're going to be less than 11 amps if you're doing less than 50 watts. Oh, okay, yeah, great. Well, what's the recommendation? Well, basically half it. Okay, so if I have 50 watts, it's 25 watts. And if I have 11 amps, that would go ahead and be approximately 5.5 amps, right? Well, I kind of round it up because, when you're calculating or guesstimating the amps you need, always go bigger, don't go lower. Because if I went down and said, 5.5, it's only 5 amps, it could be more than 5 amps because 5.5 would be, okay, get that? Make that sense? Okay. So right now I'm saying, okay, roughly 6 amps for 25 watts and low power, 5 watts on this radio is going to be approximately 2 amps. Now I say approximately because you can't just say, okay, I divided 50 in half, that's 25, and then I went low power, which was 5 into 50, variable 10, 1 amp. It's hard to say. So this is once again approximately the amperage. If you really want to do the proper thing on here, guesstimate and estimate at full power usage, even though you're not using full power usage. Does that make sense? So if you're saying I'm only going to go half power, I'm going to go 25 watts. Well, you know what 50 watts is. That's 11 amps. In theory, it might be half the amperage, but you can't guarantee that. The only true way that you could be guaranteeing that, and we're going to cover this in another episode, is to get an amp meter. Alrighty. And they're very simple, very easy to do. You can get an amp meter and like an actual voltmeter kind of multimeter tool, or they make actually little displays that you can connect to your battery here. So what I do is I basically connect it to here, take this, go over there, put my little amp meter in there, set my radio to mid power, roughly 25 watts, key up, look at what that amp meter is drawing. That is the ultimate way to do it. Alrighty. Very easy, simple to do. If you really want to be scientific, you really need to calculate this out to like that ones and zero spot, like you need it, then that's what I would suggest doing. But looking at my little diagram here, so if I have this 18 amp hour battery in my hand here on my desk, I can now say, okay, 11 amps, okay? If I go back up to my calculation here, okay, 11 amps of current, but I don't know how many hours I'm going to be able to get it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to take 11 into 18 amp hours. So in that case, the calculation came out to about approximately an hour and 15 minutes. So that's saying that, hey, here's the deal. I could take my battery. Here we go. 18 amp hours. 18 amp hours. Okay. Then I can run my radio, 11 amps. 11 amps. Okay, so 18 amp hours. You know you're going to get 18 amps in an hour. So that's going to go ahead and be there. So 11 from 18, remainder of 7. So now, and I say approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes because another thing, you got to come in to be careful about batteries. I'm going to cover in a second. So yes, if you're saying, okay, John, let's do the math here. If I'm going to take 11 into 18, that goes once. Okay, 18 minus 11, remainder of 7. Okay, well, 7 is more than this and this. Right, yeah, do a calculator if you want to. But the reason I kind of cut it a little short was because of voltage drop. And I'll get, once again, cover that in 1 second. Now, if I run it at 25 watts, approximately, if it was 6 amps, then I know with an 18 amp hour battery, I can get 3 hours out of it. Battery usage, if the 2 amps provides me, if that is true for 5 watts, then at 5 watts, I'm going to get approximately 9 hours of battery usage. Now, once again, these are estimates. The best way to do it is to find out what it is with an amp meter on there. What's the draw on there? Now, a lot of people are going to think, okay, the 18 amp hours might be screwing me up. It's not. Don't let it screw you up. The 18 AH, 18 amp hours, is basically saying that this battery can give you 18 amps in an hour, and then it's going to be done. Okay, 18 amp hours. That's what it means. Now, once again, looking at our calculations on the screen up here, we could say, hey, wait a minute. If we draw less than 18 amps, it's not going to be it. Okay, so once again, this will only give a max of 18 amps an hour. But if I need something that's going to do 9 amps an hour, then it's an 18 amps an hour. Well, 9 is half of 18, so now I'm going to get 2 hours. You see, so it's kind of that little bit of a math thing on there that kind of calculates down and down and down. So basically, 50 watts in this scenario is going to give me about an hour and 15 minutes. 25 watts is going to go to me 3 hours, and 5 watts is going to give approximately 9 hours. Now, why did I say let's go back up to the 50 watts? You said it was like an hour and 15, John. What is the funny money? What's doing the math part here? Well, that is actually coming into on something to understand here is that you got to be careful with battery voltage drop. You can't run a battery down to 0. You're going to kill it. You're going to hurt it. Everything like that on there. This battery, I believe it said don't drop it 10, I believe it was like 10 something volts. But what I did is I factored in about 11 and a half volts. So factoring in that voltage time on there, I'm going to go ahead and say that, hey, guess what? I'm going to run this battery for only about an hour and 15 minutes on high power. And then that's it. That's all I'm going to get. Now, once again, think of this thing here. This voltage, these calculations that I did here, okay? The 50 watts, all these right here. This is assuming that you are doing a constant draw of 11, 6, or 2 amps. If you're sitting there and it's doing this and this and this and you're transmitting, well then yes, if you're constantly transmitting, it's going to last you an hour and 15 or 3 hours or 9 hours. You're going to find out that the battery is probably going to last you longer than that because you may not necessarily be transmitting all the time. You might be doing a lot of receiving. And then that comes into like, well, do I go ahead and, do I, how should I figure this out? So do I do 45 minutes at 0.5? It's going to vary. But if you want to have your worst case scenario, which is what I wanted here, if I have 11 amps at 50 watts and I was going to constantly transmit at 50 watts, I would get about an hour and 15 minutes out of that battery. So hope that helps. Hope that doesn't confuse. Now let's go ahead and go down here. Let's talk about calculating watts. We're not talking about RF power here. This is a pretty big one. I want to stress this. We are not talking about RF power here. And the reason I say is because people think if you're in the radio thing and people are seeing like, oh, watts, well, that must mean power of the radio transmitting. It's not. What you need to do, and this is where I kind of came up to, is because I've seen a lot of people camping. And as these people are camping, they're glamping. Okay, glamour camping. Never thought I would use that word, but we could do. But anyways, the reason I say glamour camping is because now I'm seeing kids with iPads. I'm seeing kids with tablets. I'm seeing kids with phones and stuff like that. And, you know, when I was growing up and we went camping, you shook a stick at something in the woods and you threw it and you ran away from it, right? No, these guys are out there and they're like, hey, this campsite got Wi-Fi? Cool, I'm doing all my Wi-Fi stuff and everything. And then the next thing you know is all of a sudden it's like, you aren't really camping, you aren't really roughing it. You're just sleeping in a bedroom, like out away from your house, and you're still doing all the things in the house. Anyways, that's my opinion. Want to stress that, my opinion. But what it did was a lot of people are buying inverters. So they're buying these 12 volts and there's 12 volt batteries or devices, and they're getting these power inverters that you connect to it, and it goes 12 volts to AC, or I should say 12 volts, but 12 volts DC to 120 volts AC. But then what I'm hearing these horror stories about people going and saying, oh my God, my battery went dead, or oh my, I almost had a fire with my inverter. And the reason being is they did not think of it. They did not put two and two together and estimate what the wattage of that device is going to go ahead and be needed. Now I say that, because some inverters can only put about 150 watts. Some may put out 180, some may put out 200, 300, 400, 800. Heavy duty ones that directly connect to your car battery, I've seen almost put out like 1,800 watts of power. So I thought this was a good time, since we're going ahead and we're talking about this stuff. Let's go ahead and bring up this topic also on there too. So calculating watts, we're not talking RF, we're talking power, is a very simple factor. So your amperage times your voltage will equal your watts. So amp times volts is your wattage that it's going to require. So if you're taking a look at something that has 15 amps and it's 12 volts, guess what? 180 watts. You take 15 times 12, 180 watts. Next one here. Let's say I have 3 amps, the device draws, at 120 volts. Well, that's going to be 360 watts. So in that case, if you need an inverter that's going to go ahead and power something, it's like, hey, here's 15 times 12 volts, 180 watts, or 3 amps times 120 volts. That's going to go ahead and be 360 watts. I know what to buy now. I know what to look at. I know what to be aware of. And that's where this is very helpful to come in. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of people don't know. They think that they can buy this weird cigarette lighter plug inverter, and it looks like a coffee cup thing. Can you slide it in your coffee cup thing, and you plug in your laptop, and then all of a sudden they're going down the road, and now the laptop power supply is hotter than all Hades, and you're like, things aren't working right. And right, because the inverter that they used could not provide sufficient wattage that the device needed. So take what you will. These are 2 little tidbits and helps out that I think are going to be pretty good for people to understand. All right. There's a lot of formulas out there. This is just kind of a touching of one. But, some people say that they memorize all these formulas, these kind of things. You do and you don't. I feel my brain only has so much that I can cram in, and then stuff has to start spilling out on the other end. But then it's just kind of like being a paramedic. Is the best paramedic knowing everything right off the top of your head and stuff like that? No. I was taught, and I teach sometimes when I teach classes, is knowing everything right off the top of your head is going to be impossible. So instead of trying to be the best medic that can do that, know where your resources are at. And that's where I want to talk to you about 2 books. Now, once again, want to do the full disclaimer and stuff like that. I am not an agent or a salesperson or work for this company that I'm going to talk about in any way, shape, or form. I walked past their booth at Hamvention 2022 when I finally had a chance to walk away and take a look around at things at the booth, and I was actually surprised at the materials that they have here. So the first one is the Fast Track Mastering Technician Class Ham Radio Math. So this book is by Michael Burnett, AF7KB, with Carrie Burnett, MA. I'm not sure what her nomenclature MAT is. I'm not there, but her call is, or their call is KC7, KC7YL. I'm gonna assume that it's probably Michael's wife, but not 100% sure. But the reason I did this is because I'm always trying to find people to go ahead and help do this certain thing on there, like understanding, like transferring milliamps to amps and all those kind of thing on there. This book has a great reference to it. Even more so, it recommends a certain calculator to use in there. And I was like, why is it recommending a certain calculator to use in there? And I'll give you a good example is because when you're figuring out problems, it's going to tell you what buttons to push on the calculator. So they correspond to what is on the calculator. So boom, 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 and it will appear on there, and then it gives you your answer. So this is a great math book. I strongly suggest it, reading through it. I have some family that's going to go ahead and be eventually taking their test. They were looking through it. It was really good. Another thing I also like is what is the reference tables in there. So hey, the giga, mega, all that kind of stuff on there. You have problems, that table is in there for you for reference. And what's also cool is that when you have, and I've already had my family members start to fill it out here, what happens is you get to this part here, at the end of it is the actual questions from the test, technician test, obviously in this case, that the whole chapter kind of references it all about. So once again, DB table there, hey, power times 2, power times 4, power, all these kind of things like that. Great book on there. Once again, the Fast Track to Mastering Technician Ham Radio Math on there. They also have the Fast Track to Ham License. So a couple different books that are out there. Like I said, great reference material. I thank you for being able to do it, to get that book out there. I'm glad I stumbled along. Now, this next book kind of took me down memory lane. And I say it took me down memory lane because of what was included within the book. So I'm going to date myself. Anybody remember police call books? Okay, the ones Radio Shack used to sell had all that information in there for the actual like frequencies and stuff. Well, this book here, Ham Radio Facts, really kind of has a lot of ham radio facts, licensing and everything like that and on there. But what ends up happening is it gives a listing of like amateur prefixes. And then as there's more stuff, I mean, there's just a ton of stuff in here that is a great resource. Your phonetic alphabet, international Morse code, types of U.S. amateur call sign, frequencies for usage. And I like this too. It's not just amateur frequency usages. So look at it, if you can kind of see on there, gives GMRS, gives NOAA, gives CB frequencies, gives MERS, gives a lot of that stuff that's on there. Marine aircraft and marine generalization. So this book, that's why I said when looking at it for like the frequency stuff on there, it was like, oh my goodness, this is really a good book to have that on there. So nice book. It's got a lot of great information in there. You'd almost argue that it's kind of sort of like the Amateur Radio's Handbook on there, but and it's probably all there, but you can see like this is just the stuff that this book covers. So resistance color, capacitor colors, formulas, I mean, space weather terms, everything that's kind of in there. And while it's geared towards amateur, if you are not a ham, that's fine. A lot of this stuff is actually pretty interesting in here. So for example, I just kind of flipped to it, maximum exposure or evaluation limits before if a power level is exceeded. So let's see here. Reading without my glasses. So 6.2 and 220 is 50 watts, 70 centimeters, 70 watts. Just once again, all these kind of things on there that, you kind of forget on there and you'll be like, well, I should know and everything like that. But yeah, just some of this stuff that is in there. So great book. This one was completed and edited by Michael Burnett, AF7KB. It's just kind of an interesting thing on there. Even some of the FCC laws and regulations, like we talk back on our, the EFCR Part 97 stuff on there that we talked about on episodes like almost back last September, they kind of go into that a little more in depth. So if you're looking at a good book, Doesn't mean, once again, doesn't need to be amateur, but just kind of a electronic kind of sort of book reference, I would suggest going ahead and getting that one. Once again, my personal opinion, not paid by the company, not endorsed or sponsored by the company in any way, shape, or form. Now, because we haven't had it for 2 weeks, now we come to that part of the show. You know what really bends my antenna? You know what really bends my antenna? As we talked about batteries and formulas today, is an understanding that, guess what? Batteries are like candy bars. People are not going to like every single kind of candy bar out there. Now, right away, you're probably like, what are you getting at, John? Well, what I'm getting at here is that when I was looking for a battery and I was searching, just even in Cabela's, I had people on the side of me saying, oh, you're looking at that battery? Why are you getting that battery? Why aren't you getting that battery? And that kind of thing like that on there. And why should you get, this and this and this? Yeah, everybody's got their own opinion. That's great. Everybody thinks they've got their best solution. The biggest thing to do in this case is that anytime you're looking for a product on there, especially in this case, the batteries, look how it's going to fit your needs, fit your bill, fits that ability. I wanted something that's going to be lightweight, easy for me to do, to carry if I wanted to in the field, to be able to do something with some videos. Now, when I say the field, I mean outside of my shack on there. Am I going to be going out and doing, activation things on the air, sitting in the middle of the woods with an antenna radio and this battery? Probably not. But are there going to be times and situations where I am going to be wanting to say, hey, I want to take my HF radio out onto the porch, but I'm not going to lug my power supply. I'm not going to lug this and everything like that. But guess what? This is going to be capable of it. That I could take this and I could run 50 watts, maybe 25 watts or something like that on there. Yeah, this is going to fit my bill. It may not fit your bill, but it's going to fit my bill. And like I said, that's where the whole reference of is, well, not everybody likes every single type of candy bar. There's not. There's people who like Twix. There's people who like Kit Kat. There's people who like Nestle's Crunch, blah, 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 blah. And the list goes on and on and on. The biggest thing about it, though, is that really I've heard some people that have basically said, well, if you're not going to take my recommendation of the battery, I know the best because you have multiple batteries. Oh, no, not really. It's actually a per use caseage is what you want to take a look at. You want to find people that have used this type of battery and said, you know what, how's that battery work? And they may say, you know what, spec wise, paper wise, works great 100%. When you introduce it into a field application or something like that, where it's like 20, 30 below, this battery may suck. Don't know. Haven't done that yet with my battery. So that is where it's important to, once again, separate that fact from fiction. All right. In addition, you also maybe need to, in this case, make sure you do your due diligence and research in that matter. Sometimes it may not be just simple enough to just hook up the battery. You may need to go ahead and put a voltage cutoff or something like that on there. But guess what? It's all going to be your practical application. Don't let anybody talk you down, and don't let anybody go ahead and distract you from the plan that you had because they think that they need to interject on the model where they may not even have that model, or they may have never used it at all. And that's what today's, what really bends my antenna is all about. So, once again, thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into this show here. We'll look forward to the cool new stuff coming up. Once again, looking at the podcast, looking at interesting shows. I'm really excited. I got a new mount for my truck that is really going to do wonders for me. A little bit of a limited mount. It's only for select certain vehicles, basically Jeep, Dodge, or I should say Jeep, Ram, or Ford vehicles right now, but we're going to actually be doing a full install that I'm going to be recording and working on here too. We're going to show you where to think about for power considerations. We're going to think about antennas. We're going to think about mounting solutions. And where can we hide radios? Where can we put radios? Everything like that coming up in future episodes. So thank you for everybody to tune in. I hope everybody's having a good time. I hope your summer's starting off right. I want everybody to stay safe, relax, and if you smoke them, definitely enjoy them.